In this session, we will cover what is lifecycle hook methods in Angular, what are the types of lifecycle hook methods, and how we can use lifecycle hook methods in AngularJS application in our practical session. So let's start the video.
Hello friends, welcome to our channel WaveTutorials, and you are watching AngularJS full tutorial session. And also I request you to, if you have still not subscribed to our channel, then please subscribe to it and don't forget to click on that notification bell icon. So let's start with today's session.
So first of all, let's see what is lifecycle hook methods. Every component in Angular has a lifecycle which is managed by Angular. And a component lifecycle starts when Angular instantiates the component class and renders the component view along with its child views. The lifecycle continues with change detection, as Angular checks to see when data-bound properties change and update both the view and the component instance as required. The lifecycle ends with Angular destroy the component instance and remove its rendered template from the DOM. Directives have a similar lifecycle as Angular create, update, and destroy instance. In Angular, we have 8 types of lifecycle hook methods, and all these methods are called after instantiate a component or directive by calling its constructor, and then Angular calls the implemented hook methods. So let's discuss about them one by one. So in lifecycle hook method, the first method which is executed is ngOnChange. This method responds when Angular set or reset data-bound input properties. This method called before ngOnInit and whenever one or more data-bound input property change. Angular calls the method ngOnChange of a component or directive whenever it detects change to the input property. And this method receives a object of simple change type of current and previous value. So let's open Visual Studio Code and see a practical example with ngOnChange hook method. So this is our default AngularJS application, and here we are going to do is we will create a child component here, and that child component we will call from our root component, that is app component.html, and we will create a onChange method on child component, and then we will pass the value from our parent component to child component and see the execution of ngOnChange hook lifecycle method. So first of all, let's create a child component. ngGenerate component app child, and let's also skip test and also go with the inline style and press enter. And you can see that here we have our child app component is created. So first of all, let's call it in our parent component. Let's create a div here, and within div let's call our child component. So next requirement is we have to pass the value from our parent component to child component, and for this you already know that we have to use property decorators. So if you are not aware about what is property decorator, then please watch our videos. I will share the link in description. So let's declare two input property here, and give him a name like first name, and this will receive the values for first name from parent component, and its type should be string. We also need to call this from Angular core here, and the same way let's create another variable for last name. Now let's open our app component and create two input element of type text. and let's use two-way binding using ngModel and pass the variable name. One is for first name and another one is for last name. So let's create two variable and open app-component.ts file and create a variable like user first name equal to, let's give him a name like wave, and user last name equal to tutorials. Now let's copy both the variable name and set it with this ngModel. Now our next requirement is to pass these values, whatever we received from this text box, to the child component. So you already know that we have declared input property here, so we need to pass this from here like this, and also assign him the value user first name in the same way for the last name. Let's save it and let's open HTML of this child component and let's use interpolation to display the received value. You entered first name, last name. Let's save it and also create another terminal and execute ngSub command. So let's open the browser. You can see here that we have two input elements in our parent component and this message we received from child component. So whenever we change here, like so, the same changes will get reflected on our child component. Now we have to implement onChange method on our child component. So let's create a method here. Let me adjust this as well. So also let's close this explorer. So let's open app child component.ts file and create a ngOnChange method. So for this we need to implement this onChange method in this class. So by default onInit method is already implemented. So first of all let's remove this and implement onChange. So you also need to call this here from Angular code onChange. It's onChanges. So you will get an error again that you have not implemented this interface or incorrectly implement this interface. So for this you need to create a method like ngOnChanges and let's remove its return type, and you can see here that first of all let's add console.log and let me show you. Child component ngOnChange executed. We have received compiled successfully. So now let's open the inspect element here and let's open this console window. And you will see whenever I make any changes here, on changes executed, and whenever I type it executed again and again, you can see here that the counter is getting increased. So whenever I change or make any changes here, the counter get increased. So ngChanges method help us to get the previous and current value. So for this you have to call a method simple change to get all the changes. So for this let's create an input variable here like changes, which is a type of simple changes, and we also need to import this from Angular core. So let's comment this console, and to get all the changes, because we may receive multiple changes, so for this we need to create a for loop here which will receive all the changes one by one in changes object. So to get the property, let's create a variable const change and changes change. It will give you the name of the property which is going to be changed or changed. Now here let's create a console here to get the current and previous value. So like first of all let's type property. The property which is going to change is change, and let's also make some formatting here. So same way this variable will show you the name which property is changed, and here we will get the values, but values are changed. So previous value is change dot previous value, and current value is change dot current value. Let me add it in a single line to make some more clarity on the changes we have. Save it again, and now you can see that for first name the previous value was undefined and current value is wave, and same for the last name, the previous value was undefined and the current value is tutorial. Now whenever I make any change here, like if I give the space, and then you can see that the value of previous value of wave is wave and current value is wave and this one space. So now let's me add tutorials. So you can see that this method execute every time when I make any change in input property. So the same way we have another hook method which is ngOnInit, and this is the second hook method in Angular lifecycle hook methods. This method is called after Angular has initialized all data bound properties of a directive. This method is invoked immediately after the default change detector has checked the directive's data bound property for the first time and before of the view or content children have been checked. It is invoked only once when the directive is instantiated. So let's open Visual Studio Code and see a practical example with ngOnInit. So like we implement this ngOnChanges, we can also implement ngOnInit. So you have noticed that whenever we create a new component, it will automatically implement the ngOnInit method, but you can anytime call it in any of the component or directive. So for this we have to call on init method here, and also we need to import it in from Angular core library. So the same way we need to create a method ngOnInit method like this. And let's create a console here, console.log, child component ngOnInit executed. NgOnInit method will execute after ngOnChange method. So here the execution of component is like this. First of all, the constructor is called, then whenever any change received, the ngOnChange is executed, and then the ngOnInit method will execute. So first of all, let's comment this for loop to check the flow, and also let's create a log here in constructor. Let's save it, and you can see that when a page is executed or load, first of all the constructor is executed, then the ngOnChange executed to receive any change, or then the ngOnInit executed. And here I would like to show you the flow of how AngularJS applications module and component executed, because right now I write the code in a child component. So also let's write few code in our app component as well. So the same way we have implemented consoles here, let's implement it here as well. So it's our parent component. So instead of parent, let's name it app component, and also implement ngOnInit method here. So let's import it and create a method here, ngOnInit, and also add a console here. Now also open this app module, and here let's create a console app module constructor. So let's save all the files, and let's reload again, and you will see that app module constructors executed. So first of all, whatever is your root module will execute it first, and then the root component, which is our app component, and then after constructor executed of app component, the constructor of child component is executed. Then all the nghook methods of app component will executed. Right now we have executed only one method, which is ngOnInit, and then all the methods of child component lifecycle hook method is executed. So here the question is, what is the difference between the constructor and ngOnInit method, whereas they are doing the same thing? So let me show you. The constructor is a default method of a class that is executed when the class is instantiated, and the constructor ensures proper initialization of class member in a class and its subclass. Generally, constructor should only be used to initialize the class member and not to write the actual code, and this is the only major difference between constructor and ngOnInit. ngOnInit is a lifecycle hook method and is a better place to write actual work code that we need to execute as soon as the class is instantiated. So in ngOnInit method, you can call any method after the class is instantiated. So for example, if you require to call or connect a database, then ngOnInit is the good place to make a connection and call to your database instead of constructor. Now the third hook method is ngDoCheck. This method detects and acts upon changes that Angular can't or won't detect on its own. NgDoCheck actually extends the ngOnChange method and called immediately after ngOnChanges on every change detection run, and immediately after ngOnIt on the first run, and this method executed more than once. So let's open Visual Studio Code and see few examples with ngDoCheck hook method. So first of all, let me comment all this console I have written here. And let me uncomment this NgChanges method so that we can test NgDoCheck here. Also, let's comment the console from app component and save all the files. And in our child components, let's create a method do check and also import this from Angular core. And now let's create NgDoCheck. Let's save it. So I already told you that NgDoCheck will detect the changes which Angular can't or won't detect. So for this, we will write a code in NgDoCheck which will detect the changes made on the page. So for this, first of all, let's create a variable as a old value like previous first name and assign it as a undefined. And also let's write a code in NgDoCheck like if this dot first name is not equal to this dot previous first name, then display the value as value changed from this dot previous first name to this dot first name and assign this dot previous first name equal to this dot first name, so that the updated value get moved to this variable previous first name. Let's save it. And open browser to check the changes. So here, let me maximize this a little bit and let's reload it. You can see that the ngOnChange method is executed and also NgDoCheck executed, and here you can see that value changed from undefined to wave because we are working for first name only, and that's why it's showing the value for first name only. So whenever I make any change here like wave tutorial, so every time I make changes, NgOnChanges is executed and also the NgDoCheck executed again to check the changes. So like this you can use NgDoCheck Lifecycle Hook method according to your requirement. The next Lifecycle Hook method is ngAfterContentInit and ngAfterContentChecked. So ngAfterContentInit respond after Angular project external content into the components view or into the view that a directive is in. It is called after first ngDoCheck. And the same way ngAfterContentChecked respond after Angular check the content projected into the directive or component. It is called after ngAfterContentInit and every subsequent ngDoCheck. So the syntax is similar to the other Lifehook method that we need to implement it and then call it from the Angular core library and create a method here. To use these Lifecycle Hook methods, we need to use @contentChild and @contentChildren directives. If I involve the practical session in this video, it will get more lengthy. So I will create a separate video on this Lifecycle Hook method. You can get the link in description below. So let's move to the next Lifecycle Hook method. Next one is ngAfterViewInit and ngAfterViewChecked. So ngAfterViewInit respond after Angular initialize the component view and child view or the view that contain the directive. It called once after ngAfterContentChecked. And second one is ng after view checked. It responds after Angular checks the component's view and child view, or the view that contain the directive. It is called after ng after view init and every subsequent ng after content check. The syntax of this is similar to the other lifecycle hook methods, like we have to implement it and also we need to import it from Angular core, and here we can declare the declaration here within the component. So like the previous lifecycle hook method, this hook methods require @viewChild and @viewChildren directives. For now, I will create a basic implementation of these lifecycle hook methods, but if you would like to go in a detailed video, please check the link of that video in the description below. So let's open Visual Studio Code and create a basic methods for this. So first of all, let's open our child component here and let me close all these checks here. So for now we will comment them and let's open all the console for all the lifecycle hook methods. And now let's implement after content init and after content checked, and the same way let's also add after view init and after view checked. Let's import all of them here. And let's implement their method, like let me copy this and ng after init. Let's create a method for this, then ng after content checked and create a method this, then ng after view init and also create a method for it, and then ng after view checked and create the method for this as well. And also let's write console within all these methods. And let's make some changes with the text, like update the text here in console. Let's save all the files. And you can see, as I told you, the sequence. Let me see, there is something missing here. It should be ng. Let's save it again, and you can see here that first of all the constructor is executed. Let me increase it, let me reload it again. First of all the constructor is executed, then the next method, which is NgOnChanges, then NgOnInit, NgDoCheck, then ng after content init, ng after content checked, ng after view init, ng after view checked, and then again the NgDoCheck executed. I already told you that NgDoCheck will execute more than one to check for any of the changes on the page, and then nb after content checked and ng after view checked is executed. So all these methods, according to the requirement or whenever they are required according to the Angular compiler, they will execute it. So the next one is ngOnDestroy. So this method clean up just before Angular destroy the directive or component. It also unsubscribes the observables and detach event handler to avoid memory leaks. So if you are do not aware about what are observables and event handler, I will create a separate video for this. So please get the link in description. So this method called immediately after Angular destroy the directive. So for this, let's create a scenario where we will check how we can destroy or how we can execute the destroy lifecycle hook method. So for this, let's make few changes and create a check to unload or check the unload lifecycle hook method. So for this, let's open our app component and create two input type video button and give them a name like load reload component and create a click method here and call a method like load or destroy component and pass value true in case we would like to reload the component, and let's make it check by default, and in next video button let's make it destroy false in case we would like to destroy the component. So also let's create a method in source file and save the parameter as val, which is type of boolean, and create a variable here load destroy component, which is type of boolean, and by default whose value is true. That means by default the component is loaded, and this dot loaded component equal to val received. So by default its value is true as we passed it as true, and when we click on destroy it will make its value false, and that component will get destroyed from this parent component. So to implement the logic, let's copy this variable name and create a if condition here ng if, and check for this value. If load destroy component is true, then call, then block, else call, else block. Let's call to ngTemplates and name them as, then block, and else block. So if the value is received as true, then we need to load this component, and if value received false, then we need to destroy this component from parent component. So let's move the calling of this child component to then block, and in else block let's write a text as child component destroyed. Let's save all the file and now create a destroy method here in child component, like let's call it like on destroy, and also we need to import it from Angular core, and the same way we need to implement its life hook method like ngOnDestroy Let's write a console here. NgOnDestroy executor. Let's save all the files. And by default our component is loaded, and you can check that reloaded is already checked, and when I click on destroy, child component on destroy is executed. So let me comment all these lifecycle methods console so that it will get more clear to you, and check it again. By default constructor is executed. When I destroy it, the destroy method is executed. When I again reload it, again the constructor is executed, and when I destroy it, the destroyed lifecycle hook method is executed. So these are the all lifecycle hook methods we have available in AngularJS. So in this tutorial we have covered what is lifecycle hook methods and all of their types in AngularJS, and how we can use the lifecycle hook methods in Angular application. If you have any query, you can write a comment in a comment box, or you can also write to me at wavetutorials@outlook.com. I also request you to, if you have still not subscribed to our channel, then please subscribe to it, and please like this video. My name is Naveen, and thank you for watching the tutorial.